بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. Substantial motion, a deeper look at the soul's spiritual journey, if that's the title. This substantial motion is a philosophical term. We'll get to that, although I don't like to make things too philosophical and technical. But what we're talking about, inshallah, is this journey. And so in Islamic literature, what we find is that our whole life and what we do in this dunya that we're in has been likened to different things, okay? The life that we live here has been compared to different things. For example, a tijara, the Quran will say. It will say that those who believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, الَّذِينَ يَتْلُونَ الْكِتَابَ اللَّهِ, who recite the Quran, وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةِ, they uphold the salah, وَأَنفَقُوا مِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ سِرًّا وَعَلَانِيَةً, they give in the way of Allah in discreetly and openly. What's going on with them? يَرْجُونَ تِجَارَةً لَن تَبُورَ, they are pursuing and they are after a business, a tijara, that is never going to be at loss for them. They're not going to ever lose. They're just profiting, okay? That's one example. That's one comparison. This life of ours is kind of like business that we're doing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's one comparison. But personally, I think that one of the best, if not the best comparisons that our life has been compared to is that of a journey. And that is the theme of the conference, the journey to the beloved, correct? The journey, that is the mithal, that is the tamthil that is used, that is the comparison that is used. And we'll have so many verses and ahadith that will talk about how this is a journey. So for example, the Quran says, وَتَزَوَّدُوا فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الزَّادِ التَّقْوَى. Tazawwadu comes from the term zad. Zad means provision. You take provision on a journey. No one takes provision when they're at home. When you're at home, you have whatever you need at home. You take provision for a journey. And the Quran is saying the best provision is what? Is taqwa. Correct? Or one of these verses that you've probably heard again and again in the lectures so far. Ya ayyuhal insan innaka kadihun ila rabbika kadhan. You are laboriously laboring toward your Lord, O mankind. So journeys, no matter how luxurious and convenient they might be for some, still, it's not like being at home. It's going to be a struggle, correct? You're laboring towards your destination. So the journey of the soul is also no exception here. But you see, they've likened it to a journey. إِنَّكَ كَادِحٌ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ. You are traversing towards Him. But traversing, it's not necessarily convenient and comfortable either. You're laboring towards Him. Okay, these are some examples of how in the Quran this journey of ours is really considered a journey and compared to one. The Nahjul Balagha also same thing. Tajahazu, famous khutbah by Amir al-Mu'minin. Tajahazu rahimakumullah. I feel sorry for you, he says. May God have mercy on you. Right? Habibi, get ready because I am hearing the bells, so to speak, of this journey ringing. You know when these trains want to get going, they're always ringing that bell before they go. Remember? We see it in the movies and the cartoons. Yeah? فَقَدْ نُودِيَ فِيكُمْ بِالرَّحِيلِ. I hear the bells of this journey. And he goes on. Not only is it a journey, but it's going to be one that is accompanied with hardship to an extent. I don't want to say hardship, but it's something that if you're not ready for, it's going to be hard. Let's say it like that. Okay? He goes on. He says, انقلبوا بصالح ما بحضرتكم من الزاد فإن أمامكم عقبة كؤودا ومنازل مخوفة مهولة. Provide yourselves for the journey because the call for departure has been announced. Regard your stay in the world as very short. And return to Allah with the best provision that is with you, because surely in front of you lies a valley. It's not just a flat, straight road. Difficult to climb, places of stay full of fear and dangers. When you have to pray Salat al-Maghrib, for example, you're traveling between cities, you stop at the rest area, you don't know what's going to happen. Yeah? Those ones. All right, so these are just a few examples. This life of ours has been again and again likened to a journey. The Imams, the Holy Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they have to prepare us for this. They will use terms that we are accustomed to and familiar with so that we get an idea of what we're dealing with here when it comes to the destination we're trying to get to. So journey, if you want to define it, and this is all introductory, by the way, we're going to get to the meat of it, to the kafta of it in a minute. All right? So journey, when I hear the word journey, what comes to mind? All right, point A, point B, plus provision. No one's gonna to go on a journey, yes, without being prepared for it. These are the main elements of a journey, right? Now I want to apply that to our life here, see what's going on. Why has this life been likened to a journey? When journey means going from point A to point B. Where are we going? What is the provision for this journey? The Quran is very clear about that. The provision for this journey is that which will help us reach the destination. The verses and the hadith tell us it's amal. All right. Tonight we're going to talk about amal a lot, but we're going to change it up a little bit to something that we haven't usually heard before. All right. We want to make this traveling to this conference worth it, inshallah. All right. It says amal, to the point that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this amal is so important, this provision is so important, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala words it like this in the Quran. It says, I didn't create you except for the best of amals, which is ubudiyya. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسِ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I created you for one purpose, and that is to be my abds. Alright? What does an abd do? They are abds, they have ubudiyya. They only are submitted to the will of the Mawla, the Master. Okay? We all know we were not created for ubudiyya. That is not the final, ultimate goal that even Allah has in mind. The ultimate goal is, let's say, Jannah. But because the provision to get there is so important, He says, I created you for this provision. It's very interesting, the wording here. Okay? Now, having said all of that, this amal, which is so key, okay, and is playing the main role in getting us from point A to point B, there are three ways to look at it, and that's our discussion tonight. There are three ways to look at this amal. I'm going to call it like this, although these are not very good terms to use necessarily, but for lack of better terms. There's a beginner way to look at amal, and we'll get to that. There is an intermediate way, and there's a deeper, more advanced perspective and way to look at amal, which is the provision for this journey of mine that the Quran calls my life a journey. All right? Are we clear with that? About that? All right, let us begin. Recite salawat ala Muhammad. Starting with the beginner kind of perspective, okay? A beginner's perspective will be this. I don't even like to call it superficial or beginner, but it's not as deep as the other ones, let's call it, okay? And the reason why I'm hesitant to call it beginners or something that's superficial, because the Quran also words things in this way. Okay, so this is in our books, this is in our literature and scripture, but Allah, you can tell, has said it for the ones that have the minimum of understanding. Okay? This amal, when we look at it, we say, all right, God created hell and put it there. Heaven, put it there as if, okay? We want to get from point A, which is the hall, mahogany, whatever hall, one of these names that I have to look up in the dictionary, hall. I have to get from point A to point B, which is Jannah. Okay? I have to get from this life in dunya to Jannah. Correct? How do I get there? With the a'mal, the good deeds. That's one way to look at it, okay? And in this, when you look at it like this, amal is a currency that you attain in this dunya, and in the akhirah you do tijara with. You purchase Jannah, okay? And we have literature for this. It's as if you're purchasing Jannah, or you are protecting yourself from Jahannam. And so, when you go into the barzakh, for example, they will ask you about your beliefs and certain a'mal that you've done, like the salah, let's say. Those bigger ones. What'd you do with your shabab, with your youth? Where'd you get your wealth from, for example, as the hadiths tell us, all right? These things. These things will be asked about. If my deeds are good and I tell them what I've done, they will give me, or they will take me from a point A to a point B. In the barzakh, they will put me in a jannatun min jinanil jannah, in a garden of the gardens of paradise, as the hadith will say, for example, a garden that is a little piece of the grand Jannah, inshallah, that we're going to go to. Okay? Or they will put me in hufratun min hufar nar, in a pit of the pits of hellfire, in the barzakh, in the grave. Okay? So, there's a little equation here. They will look at me and what my deeds were. They will say, this will bring about this for you. Okay. That's in the barzakh. On Judgment Day, they will set up the mizan, the scale. They will put my good deeds and bad deeds there. They will weigh things out. They will do hisab and calculate and reckoning. And then once it's clear where I'm supposed to end up, they say, okay, you want to go to Jannah, right? You want to go to point A, point B? This is the bridge that you cross, the Sirat, the bridge of Sirat. Pass over it. Those whose good deeds didn't add up to the amount that they had to, they fall in to the hellfire. And the ones whose deeds were good enough, they buy Jannah, they buy the ticket, they stamp that ticket, and they go to point B, which is destination Jannah. This is something that we have in our sources, brothers and sisters. This kind of perspective. We're not going to say that this is not there. It's there. But it's not as accurate, okay? Accurate, let's say philosophically, of what is the reality of things, okay? Let's move on. So I want you to remember, this is the key line here. I am buying Jannah with my deeds. Moving on to the more into the intermediate type of perspective, which will be very similar to what we talked about, except there's a big difference here. God created us. We perform actions. With these actions, it's not that we're going to purchase Jannah or Jahannam. What are we doing? We are building Jannah and Jahannam with those actions. This is a more accurate way to look at it Quranically. Okay? And we have so many verses. فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَهُ, which means the one who does an atom's worth of good will see that good deed, not see the reward or punishment of it. Will see the deed itself. And there's a beautiful tafsir which we have no time to get into in Surah Al-Insan, where it says that the likes of Tabatabai, these greats, they've explained that it says يُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ, they are feeding the poor. But then it says they are striking the ground and from it springs are gushing out in Jannah. And it's using the same tense, present tense of the verbs. In other words, and Tabatabai explains, he says, that means that when these people are feeding the poor, that is translating into gushing springs out in Jannah. That is that. It's not that I will go to Jannah and I'll say, hey, I have some currency on me. I got some cash on me. What is it? Feeding the poor. That's your currency. That's good deeds. Yes, it is. Give me a spring of water. No. The moment that you feed the poor, let's say, you are at the same time digging springs there. That's what it's translating to. So this second view and perspective is a little different than the first. It's a little more daqiq than the first. The first said, Jannah is one thing, my deeds are something else. I purchase Jannah. Here it says, your Jannah is your deeds. Okay, this is the second perspective. And we have, as I said, lots of literature for this as well. So the conclusion here that we come to, that my Jannah is my deeds, is going to be a little deeper. But this is more accurate and is pretty accurate actually, and this is called tajassum al-a'mal, the embodiment of actions. You know, it comes from jism. Tajassum al-a'mal. This is a concept that our philosophers, our ulama, our mufassirin have discussed in depth, and we have a lot of good stuff out there for that. Okay? Beautiful discussions. But then let's move on. Although it's accurate, it's not complete. So the first one, the difference between the first perspective and the second was, one isn't very accurate philosophically versus the second one. The second one versus the third one that we're going to get to it's philosophically accurate, tajassumul a'mal, but it's not the whole story of what's happening either. Okay? What is this third one that we want to talk about now? The deeper understanding of amal, which is the provision for this journey. What's actually happening according to our philosophers? What's happening? They will say that, look, you and I don't want to say the mistake we're making, but what we're doing here is we are actually taking the focus in the first and second perspective. We're taking the focus and we're putting it on the spotlight on what? Amal. And what that translates to. What does that? Is it currency that I buy Jannah with? Is it Jannah itself? What is this Amal doing? All the focus is there. And trying to figure out where destination A, destination B is. Point A and point B are. Where are they? Well, in both of those views, Jannah is somewhere else, right? And we're going to go to it, we build it. But this third one says, no. I'm going to take the focus and I'm going to put it on, not amal, but the nafs itself. The soul itself, let's call it for now, nafs, okay? The soul itself, and there is a journey happening not from dunya, we go to Jannah, point B, although that is happening. But guess what? The real journey is within. إِنَّكَ كَادِحٌ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ كَدْحًا is actually speaking of how our nafs is going to be going through a lot of different worlds and is going to be completing in a certain way that is unprecedented, that we have to leave this dunya to experience or else you can't experience it. Okay? And you can even say, it might be safe to say that Jannah will be a byproduct of this. In the previous two perspectives, what was it? Jannah was the main thing we were looking at, point B, that we want to get to. In this perspective, it says point A, you in the dunya, point B, you again. We're looking at you, where you're at, where your nafs ends up. Not ends up in point B, how much you grow. And Jannah might not even be point B destination, it might be a byproduct of that destination you've reached within. In one way, one can say even that Jannah that we will build with our a'mal, some of it has to do with ourself. It's built because of us. All right, I'm trying to stay as non-technical as I can, but we're going to get a little technical, okay? Before I get into that, yes? Well, actually, let's just go straight into it. So, what we concluded so far, in addition to good deeds, building our akhirah, they're also building us. You are not what you eat, you are what you do. All right? Yes, from a biological perspective, from a dunyawi, materialistic perspective, you are what you eat. I don't disagree with that. All right? I'm a good reflection of that myself. All right? But you are what you do. In the barzakh onwards, after this dunya onwards, you are what you do. That's what it's saying. So it's not accurate to say that you're accumulating good deeds, you're buying Jannah and all that stuff. So what is going on here? What is going on, brothers and sisters? This is the part we get a little technical. It's like when you go to a doctor, they say it's going to sting a little bit. All right, let's open up this parenthesis here. And this was what we had in the title of this talk, substantial motion. Arabic, haraka jawhariya. Okay, let's talk about that a little bit. And I'm going to try to simplify as much as I can. And I'm not the type to try to get too technical and too complicated. So I'm going to be skipping a lot of stuff. I'm not going to be opening up a lot of stuff. If someone who is a colleague happens to be sitting here, hopefully they forgive me because I'm not going to get too technical. All right, but let's talk about this. Haraka jawhariya. Haraka, we all know, means motion. Jawhariya, they say substantial. Okay, but these are philosophical terms. They're being used in a philosophical context usually. This motion that we talk about in this discussion, in this topic, is not one of motion in the dunya. Oh, we see things moving around, changing, going up and down, changing colors and so on. No. It's not talking about these things, these outer aspects. Haraka jawhariya, let me read off of this. It says that within themselves and in the core of their existence, things are in a gradual, constant motion from where to where? From potentiality to actuality. This is the part we have to... You might just be sitting there, brothers and sisters. Ayatollah so-and-so, let's say Ayatollah Amin Rastani, sitting there saying dhikr. Okay? Ayatollah Bahjat, sitting there saying dhikr. Is he moving? Not moving really. But if he's doing the dhikr right, with the proper conditions, with the taqwa that he has throughout his life, potentiality is actually transforming to actuality. Or as they say, Quwwa is turning to fi'l. Okay? And I'm speaking slowly so we can follow here, although there's nothing too hard about what I'm talking about. All right. A constant, gradual motion from potentiality to actuality, from materiality to immateriality, tajarrud. And from the lowest level or realm of existence, which is the material maddi level of existence and realm of existence, to the highest level of existence, total tajarrud. That is haraka jawhariya. Okay? Something in a constant motion and movement of actualization. This is what they argue, and this is, they say Mullah Sadra was the one who really argued for this and really pushed it forward, this discussion. Okay, my parenthesis is still open. We're still in parentheses here, talking about Haraka Jawhariya. He says that everything out there is in a constant state of growth. Okay, to the point where when everything dies from this dunya, they go to that next level of existence, which is one that is not bound by matter, material. It's not. It is transcending that material realm of existence, okay? When we die, that's what happens, right? We are shedding the body, okay? And we're actually growing. We still have a barzakhi body, they say, but it's not a material body anymore, all right? We're still stuck with that mithali barzakhi body. And then we continue with journey. With this journey, we shed that even. Yawmul Qiyamah is the ultimate shedding of everything, where we reach a certain realization and awakening that we're going to talk about. Inshallah, we're going to get there, hopefully. All right. So this haraka jawhariya is for everything out there that is material. Okay? Us, our bodies, slowly, as we grow, these bodies are shed and we move on. Okay. He says, look, every material thing out there that is going through haraka jawhariya, people like Ayatollah Jawadi Amuli and others have said this also applies to immaterial things like the nafs. That the nafs is also going through a constant motion of developing and growing and growing and growing. So we're trying to, let me remind us what the discussion is. The link between amal and what's happening with us. How do I look at amal? Is it just a ticket I put in my pocket and I buy Jannah with? Is it an investment that I'm making? In other words, this, what I do here, turns into something bigger there, the second perspective. Or is amal actually like a muscle that from within it grows when it is exercised, when it is trained? And it's a live being as if. Yes, when you exercise, when you lift, when you do resistance training, what's happening? You are building muscle mass, muscle tissue. Is that dead or alive? It's a live being as if, and it's part of you, right? And so this Ayatollah, the likes of Ayatollah Jawadi Amali and them, they say the nafs also has a haraka jawhariya. Now, we're still in our parentheses talking about this philosophical idea here. There are some who find fault in this. They say, look, haraka jawhariya only has to do with the material world. The nafs is immaterial. We cannot call this haraka jawhariya anymore. Okay? This is a quality that can only be ascribed to matter, material, madda. This is just a little ishkal that they find, a little problem they find in this matter. And they say, okay, no problem. These great scholars, they come out and they say, it's fine. We won't call it haraka jawhariya. What will we call it then? They'll call it other things. Let me see what it says here. The answer some have given is that although one's nafs detaches from the material and the matter of the worldly life, and then you're going to tell me that there can't be no more haraka jawhariya. Haraka jawhariya can only happen with matter. That's true. And once the body has died and the nafs has separated, all of the potentiality has now been actualized because we are no longer attached to the body. That's true. Yet it is still wrapped in various veils when it comes to its original form, that absolute tajarrud and detachment. Remember I said even the barzakh, you still have somewhat of a body. It's not material. There's a discussion there I don't want to get into. He says this, you still are veiled, even in the barzakh. You haven't completely actualized all potentiality. Okay? And so therefore, from this perspective, one can say that when compared to its ensuing state of having less veils, the nafs is still in a state of unrealized potential and needs to evolve and perfect to reach ultimate actualization of all potentialities. In a nutshell, brothers and sisters, this problem that you find, that once we've left this dunya, we can't say the nafs can grow anymore. This ishkal, this problem is not applicable. Because I won't call it haraka jawhariya so you don't get upset, oh philosopher. But still, there is room for an actual growth that's happening in barzakh onwards. And we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it more, brothers and sisters. Why do you want to call it perfection and growth? Just because the nafs is still veiled by certain things, and it still has to go through certain stages to reach a certain point before that ultimate perfection is attained. Okay? This is why many greats have used other terms instead of motion or haraka, he says, in regards to this growth and perfection. Terms such as, okay, instead of haraka jawhariya, we'll say tearing of veils. They say when you go to the barzakh, you're going to be tearing veils. Let's call it that. Or casting aside darkness. Or Tabatabai has this, he says, strengthening of love is diyad al-hub. We'll call it that if you have an issue with substantial motion. I don't like that word myself anyway. What does that even mean? Substantial motion. Yeah, it's a philosophical term. These terms aren't at odds with the immateriality of the barzakh, he says. Okay, so just to go back so that we can be ready for what I want to talk about. We talked about how this third look, this third perspective says, when you do amal, you yourself are being built. And the underlying idea here of you being built is haraka. A jawhari haraka. Some said, don't call it haraka jawhariya, because haraka jawhariya only has to do with the material realm of existence. We said, okay, fine, no problem. We'll call it casting veils aside, casting darkness aside, more love happening. And guess what? You know, some say, I've heard scholars say this, that in the barzakh, you know, when you actually are biting into that fruit or whatever it is that you're eating, I prefer Snickers, but whatever does the job, okay? As you take pleasure in it, here you take pleasure, but you add calories, right? You know, I always say, when you're young, right, you're broke, and you can't really afford all the good stuff you want. As you get older, you're not broke, but you're about to break. And you can't have the same good time that you used to have and eat the stuff that you used to eat and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, anyway, someone got me a piece of chocolate cake last night, and I said, you know what, I don't care. Even if I die in bed tonight, let the haraka jawhariya begin. All right, anyway, so some had an ishkal. We said we won't call it haraka, we'll call it these things. Oh, sorry, this is what I was saying. So ulama, they've said that when you are taking pleasure in the fruits of barzakh, let's say, you know what's actually happening? Yeah, you're taking pleasure, but as you bite into that apple, you're tearing veils and you're gaining ma'rifah as well. Here you gain calories, there you gain ma'rifah. Okay? The barzakh is all growth, they'll say. For those who have the prerequisite for it in this dunya, of course, and they planted those seeds, okay? And we'll get more to the barzakh a little bit later. But for now, just to complete this haraka jawhariya discussion, or casting of veils and darkness and all of that, is diyad al-hub. I want to just quote a few of these ulama and what they say about this growth of the nafs and how it is tied with amal. Okay, so that once we understand the reality of amal, we take life much more serious. Just today I was on social media a little bit, and then some guy was on a motorcycle and they're doing these crazy tricks with a motorcycle. The guy fell off. God knows what happened to the guy. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to put myself in danger just to get an adrenaline rush, right? I'm going to take life serious. I'm going to take care of this body, because this body, although isn't going to move on to the next life with me, but it is what gives me enough of a push to make it to destination. You know what I'm saying? So if we understand the link between amal and our growth and our Jannah, our destination, heck, I'm going to take things very serious. This is why we're having these discussions, brothers and sisters. All right. What do the likes of Tabatabai, Jawadi Amuli, Hassan Zada Amuli say? I'm going to read off of this a little bit in regards to this link between amal, this third perspective that we have towards amal. Number one, Tabatabai, he says, the verses of Quran tell us the different stations of man's journey. life in this dunya, death, entering barzakh, death, entering akhirah, and finally, ruju' ila Allah, and returning to Allah. He says the verses of Quran talk about these. Okay. According to these verses, the existence of man is an ever-changing one. Ever-changing. Mutahawwil, mutaghayyir. You don't want to call it harakah, you don't call it harakah. But this is what some say it is. And not harakah, moving, perfection and growth. Growth within. Going from point A to point B within. If you're going to use the bodybuilding example, going from a scrawny nobody to a jacked somebody. Alright? And it all came from within. You've seen these people who like have transplants and they put on muscles. That's not strength. Real strength comes from within. Yeah? Same thing here. It's from this journey is within. Alright. He says, according to these verses, the existence of man is an ever-changing one, which begins its journey from imperfection towards the pinnacles of completeness, putting behind it station after station after station. Mankind is in need of a perfection and deliverance that is only attainable through the afterlife. We have to go there, or else you won't gain it. Okay, so the same way, I don't know why people are scared of leaving this dunya, because the same way the baby was in mommy's tummy, and the baby comes out. If you ask the baby when baby's in mommy's tummy, you want to come out? Like, no, I'm good. We good. When they come out, like, you want to go back in. It looks like you were good. It's like, no, I'm good here now. Same thing. You are born again from this rahim and womb of dunya to akhirah. Okay? So this constant laborious growth. Yeah? So innaka kadihun. When baby comes out, baby ain't smiling, baby crying. Okay? Because it's kadih. And the same will hold probably, with some exception. We don't have time to get into those details, but there are exceptions that will make it even easier. But all in all, we are being born and born and born. Okay? And we need to go there, or else we'll never attain that. All right. That's what Tabatabai says, just as example, that there is this tahawwul, taghayyur. What is Jawadi Amali? He says the nafs experiences harakah. Now he firmly believes in harakah with the nafs. I've noticed on several occasions I've seen it, he talks about it. He says no, it's harakah. And he calls it that. And unlocks more and more potential as it goes, he says. What does Hassan Zada Amali say? He says it says here in the thought of Ayatollah Hassan Zada Amali, after leaving the body, the soul will take on otherworldly body corresponding with the malakat of the nafs. Malakat is those dispositions that you developed in accordance with your amal in this life. Okay? So your barzakhi self looks like what you did here. What you did here equals what you are there. You are what you do, remember? Ilm and amal have the greatest impact on now the word here is ishtidad wujudi, that growth in our existence. They have the biggest impact, he says. So if the Quran says provision, and yes, the word provision is used, and that implies the beginner perspective, but there's a deeper thing going on here. The Quran will say it in a way that normal people can understand, but there's a lot more going on here. He says, ilm and amal are that which will define what we are later. The real essence of every person is built by their ilm and amal. In other words, in the dictionary of Irfan, the real insan is the one who has actualized the potentialities of their nafs. Biologically speaking, insan is a mammal that can talk and jump and whatever they do. Okay? But from a barzakhi perspective, that's not what is an insan. What is an insan? Insan equals ilm, amal, hay, muta'allih, and these things. Okay? So, therefore, and to this extent, brothers and sisters, this is so interesting. For me, it was interesting. Ayatollah Hassan Zada Amali says, I don't have a definition for insan. I don't. All I can tell you is, not biological insan. We all know what biological insan is. He says, an insan in the barzakh, I can't give you a definition for that. I'm unclear about that. He says all the definitions that have been given, they're not real definitions. Right? In other words, I want to say it's very subjective to what you do. Every person, to the amount of what they've done here, are an insan there or not. If you want to be an insan, yeah, see what your amal and your ilm looks like. Wow. So it's not just a ticket that you punch. Or it's not even just me building Jannah. Yeah, I'm building Jannah. That might be a byproduct even. I'm building the self and the nafs. That's what they're saying. All right. And so this brings me to, I'm just going to read the title of a section or chapter of one of Tabatabai's books called Risalatul Wilaya. He has a discussion, and that's one of the last, or if not the last book Tabatabai wrote before he left this dunya, okay? And so you can tell that he has put everything that he has when it comes to this irfan and spiritual growth, he's put it in that book. It's a treatise. It's like some 300 page book or anything, but he has put some keys and secrets in there that you usually won't find elsewhere. And he's done it in a very concise manner, of course, that's just how he is. And so he explains, and I'm not going to get to the explanations, I'm just going to read the title to you because it's just echoing what we've been talking about so far. It says, the chapter says, the title of the chapter says, في أن لظاهر هذا الدين باطنا ولصورته الحق حقائق. That's the name of that's the chapter's title. He says that what we want to discuss in this chapter, and it's the first chapter of the book, by the way, he says about how there is a inner aspect, or let's call it real aspect, a haqiqi aspect to the deen other than the outer aspect that we're engaged with and dealing with on a daily basis. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make a rule one time, will say this is halal. Can Allah change it and make it haram? Yeah, but He doesn't. But can He? He can. Because these are, He has that authority to do so. Okay? But there are some things that are reality. They're not something that someone who has authority can say, one day I want it like this, one day I want it like that. These things are based on a reality. Okay? There is a batin here, yeah, that everything is based on. There's stuff going on, let's say. Tabatabai points this out. He says, these do's and don'ts that will constitute our ubudiyya, guess what? It's not just an amal that you did and is gone. These translate into reality. It's as if these are real breathing things. These amal that we do. Not that we have, when we go on to akhirah, we have like 1 million children now. Oh, these are all my amal. No. It's something like that muscle tissue example that I gave. It's a living part of you. Right? And so he discusses over there how, and as I said, we don't have time for that. It's a very beautiful discussion there that he has. All right, so the journey is within our nafs, and that is the real journey taking place. It is transforming potentiality to actuality. All right, so that is the core of what's happening, okay? Now, I want to give 3 examples just so that we get an understanding of what this growth entails. A person who has amal, how this is going to influence and impact them, okay? One is in the barzakh, and a couple of them I want to talk about in the akhirah. These are taken from a course we have on this. And those of you who know, most of it is based on that second one that took 5 years to make, okay, that you've still been waiting on. But alhamdulillah, it's done. And so this is the sneak peek to that one. Those of you who've been asking forever. The first one though, the barzakh one, okay? Just to show, we had that beginner kind of perspective, right? They come, they ask us questions, we get the answers right, and then they say, oh, he got the answers right, give them a piece of Jannah, destination, point B, all that stuff we said. That was one way to look at it. But there's another way that Tabatabai talks about in another book of his, Kitabul Insan Ba'da Dunya. There he talks about how the questioning of the grave, when they come to ask you questions, it's not actually them asking you a question to see, hey, let's see, is this person's Lord really Allah or is it somebody else? But in reality, what they're doing is they're like, okay, let's see what seeds you planted in the dunya. Let's see what you planted in your heart in the dunya. Okay? Was Allah your Lord or not? If throughout my life here, I didn't listen to Allah at all, I could care less, or I had a sloppy, a wajib and haram diet type of thing. I do wajib sometimes, I do haram sometimes, all that kind of stuff. This, Allah hasn't been instilled in this heart. And then on the other side, when they say, Man Rabbuk, who's your Lord? It's not like, oh, let's ask him to see who his Lord is. They're like, let's open up his heart and see what is in there. If a person has lived Allah, breathed Allah in this life, how? By obeying Allah. You're in this constant struggle of proving to yourself Allah is more important than you. How do you prove that? Every time a wajib comes up, you're saying, your body's telling you don't do it. You say, no, that one's more important. Who's that one? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so through these wajib and harams, you're instilling that He's my Lord. So they're going to open up that chest, so to speak, that's to see who is your Lord in your heart. It's a takwini questioning, they call it. a takwini questioning is not even real questioning, they say. You're actually just growing into something. This is an example of that harakah that we're talking about. What determines that Allah comes out of my heart? Well, your amal determines it. You see that link? It's showing itself here, for example. You've been built enough or ready to be turned into something that Allah comes out when this question is asked. But there are some who won't be able to answer. Why? Because their life is not an embodiment of that. It's not a reflection of that. They have not instilled Allah in their heart. So this, it says that they're going to have to beat on him till he's reminded that Allah was his Lord. And they're doing it out of love, by the way. Because they don't want to leave that for akhirah. It's going to even get worse. Let's get them ready in the barzakh. They didn't do the work and put the work in the dunya to take care of them in the barzakh. And some hadith say, I don't know, like it takes like hundreds of years for some people to remember who their prophet was. This person who said, Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah all the time, because they didn't obey Rasulullah, they can't answer. And it says when they remember who their prophet is, they can't remember his name. These are believers, by the way. But they can't remember because they didn't have amal. Amal. And so what do they say? They say, oh, I remember, it's the one that had that book, Quran. They don't even remember his name, for God's sake, or for their own sake even. And so they have to be reminded. But that reminder is not going to be something too comfortable. All right? That's one example. Let's move on. The second example I want to give you in Yawm al-Qiyamah. All right? We have verses that say, for example, I'm going to read off of these. يَوْمَ هُمْ بَارِزُونَ لَا يَخْفَى عَلَى اللَّهِ مِنْهُمْ شَيْءٍ. On that day, nothing is hidden from Allah. Okay? لِمَنِ الْمُلْكِ الْيَوْمِ. Who does all sovereignty, power belong to on this day, Day of Judgment? لِلَّهِ الْوَاحِدِ الْقَهَّارِ. Okay? I'm going to go through 5 or 6 verses, and I want to see, I want to draw something from this. I want to actually ask a question. So we have a verse that says, on that day, Allah says, all power belongs to me, all sovereignty belongs to me. Okay? يَوْمَ تُوَلُّونَ مُدْبِرِينَ مَا لَكُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ مِنْ عَاصِمٍ. On that day, there's no one to protect you when you're running away from Allah. On that day. مَا لَكُم مِّن مَلْجَإٍ يَوْمَئِذٍ وَمَا لَكُم مِّن نَكِيرٍ. There's no one to help you, no one to protect you, no one that you can seek refuge in on that day. Okay? يَوْمَ لَا يُغْنِي مَوْلًا عَنْ مَوْلًا شَيْئًا. No one can help anyone on that day. Yawma, you see, that day. لا يكتمون الله حديثا. They can't hide anything from Allah of speech. الأمر يومئذ لله. On that day, everything, the affair is in Allah's hands. He makes the decisions. Tabatabai asks a question here. Okay? Once again, this is an example of how if we've grown or we've done enough to be able to grow to a point where we see things. What's happening? What are you seeing on the Day of Judgment? These are the things you're seeing. Look at the question he asks. He says, all of these verses had a little clause in them. What is that clause? On that day. Question. When it says on that day, Allah says, all mulk belongs to me. Didn't mulk belong to Allah before the Day of Judgment too? This is saying that on that day it belongs to Him. On that day no one can protect you. Wait a minute. If Allah wanted to hurt me before that, He couldn't? All of these have a clause. It says on that day this is the case. But we all know it's always been the case. Am I right or not? So the question is Allah changing? And that's what these verses are talking about? That on that day Allah says, oh, now alhamdulillah, or alhamdulillah, all praise is due to me because I'm God. I have control now. I have mulk. Well, didn't you have mulk before? Excuse me, but if you didn't have mulk before, you ain't no God. Just saying. That's what they taught us in Sunday school at least. All right? All of these verses and more are talking about on that day Allah is changing. That's where they say, but Allah can't change. So what is changing actually? You and I are changing. Our perspective is changing. We are gaining proper tawheed. We are coming to this realization and growth that وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. That you didn't throw, O Prophet, when you threw. Think about it. It's an oxymoron. You didn't throw when you threw, but Allah threw. Who threw? Eventually who threw? Tawheed af'ali. We don't come to this realization except there, the ultimate realization. But there has to be so much growth, so much shedding, they say. The dunyawi body, the barzakhi body, all of this. But to reach that growth, if you don't have the amal and all of that, once you come to this realization, well, actually, I don't have time to get into that. Will you have such realizations? Will you not? What's going on? How close you are to the haqq and haqiqah, how you are not, how close you are not. How for some people, the day of judgment is 1 hour, but for some it's 50,000 years because they are that far away from haqq. I don't want to get into those discussions. But all in all, you are what you do. Okay? This is an example. And once again, I'm skipping a lot of details and arguments here and all of that. Okay? And finally, another example. Another example of something's going on with us. Now this one, there might be different opinions on it, okay? But this is what some scholars, their understanding is. You know those verses that talk about, for example, how on the Day of Judgment, everything is changed. وَإِذَا الْجِبَالُ سُيِّرَتْ. The mountains are moved. تَكُونُ الْجِبَالُ كَالْعِهْنِ الْمَنْفُوشِ. They are like pounded cotton, the mountains. إِذَا بَرِقَ الْبَصَرُ خَسَفَ الْقَمَرُ. Yeah, the moon goes out. جُمِعَ الشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ. They come together, the sun and the moon. إِذَا الشَّمْسُ كُوِّرَتْ. It's wrapped up in كَوَاكِبٌ تَثَرَتْ. The stars fall and all of this. الْبِحَارُ فُجِّرَتْ. The seas turn into fire. And so we read these verses and we're like, okay, the dunya is going to be destroyed. Nothing's going to exist. But, and these are the parts that Tabatabai doesn't go to get too explicit about, but others have said this is what he's saying because you can tell he's hinting at things here and there in his works. They say, guess what? Because of your growth on that day, it's not that all of this stuff is actually happening. Okay? And now you can tell why Tabatabai won't explicitly say it, because it sounds off. But in reality, the person reaches a point where they understand and they see and they experience that everything is Allah, everything else is but a shadow, as if because of its utter dependence on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As if it's a shadow. A shadow exists, but barely, let's say. Okay? That's the best example I can think of, at least. A shadow exists, but barely exists. It's like nothing, really. And so our ulama have pointed out that there are two angles to look at things, objects, out, all of creation of God. One is wajhul khalqi, one is wajhullahi. Wajhul khalqi is what we see. I see an elephant, I see a giraffe, I see a human being and all that. I am negligent and oblivious of the total dependence of the existence of this being on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When I see elephant, Allah's not in the definition, is not in the equation at all, and that's fine. But on the Day of Judgment, that aspect will be neglected. The only aspect which is the real aspect of things comes out, and that is their link to Allah and total dependence on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Water quenched my thirst in this dunya. On the Day of Judgment, Allah quenches thirst. وَأَشْرَقَتِ الْأَرْضُ بِنُورِ رَبِّهَا. On that day, the sun isn't lighting up the earth. Allah is lighting up the earth. Wait a minute, is Allah the sun? What's going on? No. But you will understand, you will see, this is what some have postulated, that you will see that that water that is supposed to turn fire off is on fire. All of the causality and everything goes out the window. Everything is reliant and dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And so, to go back to our what we were talking about initially, just today I actually came across a little dua by the great Allama Qadi. I usually don't talk about these things, but whatever, today we just let go, man. Qadi Tabatabai, he has a line, and I'd seen this before, and Sayyid Muhammad Hussain Tahrani also talks about it in his book, that Allama Qadi, one of the du'as he would do, or he would teach others of his students to do, it's not for me and you necessarily, was that Allahumma arin al-ashya' kama hiya. Oh Allah, show me how things are in their reality, what they really are, which is total dependence on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what it really comes down to. These people have reached that ultimate tawheed. So going back to what we were talking about initially, brothers and sisters, look at all the Look at the journey that we have before us. And look at how the provision of this journey, okay, is only amal. How serious am I going to take this amal? And not only is it something that I buy Jannah with, not only is it something that builds my akhirah, but out of all these things that are happening, most importantly, it is building the nafs, it is building myself. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Salawat.